Clean Water Services Advisory Commission meeting. So welcome CWAC members, Clean Water Services staff, and any guests we have in attendance. Stephanie, if you could walk us through our logistics and our introductions, please.
Good evening. This is the CWAC meeting for April 13th, 2022. Welcome to our CWAC members, as well as members of the public and Clean Water Services staff. We will be recording tonight's meeting. Please be aware tonight's meeting is being recorded. I will now read through names for the CWAC membership and ask you to say a brief hello to the participants in tonight's meeting. I will call on people in the order you are in the participants panel list. It is roughly alphabetical by first name. Fatima.
Good evening, everyone. This is Fatima Taha, at-large representative.
Thank you. Lori Hennings.
Good evening. My name is Lori Hennings. I am an environmental rep.
Matt Wellner.
Hey, Matt Wellner, one of the builder developer reps.
Tony Weller.
Tony Weller, the other builder developer rep.
And Chair Song.
Terry Song with Murray Smith, the business representative.
We have Clean Water Services staff with us this evening as well. We'll begin with Jack Liang.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Liang, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Clean Water Services. Been here for 5 months. Nice to meet you.
Jerry Linder.
Hi, Jerry Linder, General Counsel for Clean Water Services.
Kathy Leader.
Good evening, Kathy Leader, Chief Financial Officer with Clean Water Services.
Mark Jockers.
Hi there, Mark Jockers, Chief of Staff with Clean Water Services, and I will be sitting in as Clean Water Services non-voting rep tonight as Diane is at home caring for her husband who just had surgery recently. So thank you.
And Mark, I believe that Chair Catherine Harrington has just joined us.
Okay, I see her right up there in the corner. So Chair, would you like to say hello as we're going through everybody who's on the call? So
good afternoon or good evening, everyone. It's good to see you again. Thank you as always for being members of this very important advisory committee to the Board of Directors. I look forward to learning more this evening.
thank you.
We have some Clean Water Services staff joining us by phone only this evening, so I will invite them to say a brief hello. We have Chris White.
Culture Equity and Learning. Hello, Chris White, Culture Equity and Learning Manager. Good evening.
Jody Newcomer.
Hello, everyone. I'm the technical editor.
Shannon Huggins.
Hi there, Shannon Huggins, Public Involvement.
And Victor Davidson.
Oh, Victor Davidson, IT Analyst with Clean Water Services.
I am Stephanie Morrison, Office Manager for Clean Water Services. And we have some members of the public joining us tonight. We have Andrew Karlstrom. Mr. Karlstrom, could you please identify the organization you might be representing?
Sure.
To the members.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Andrew Karlstrom, and I'm with the Tualatin Valley Water District.
Thank you. And we have Dale Feek. Mr. Feek. Mr. Feek, are you with us?
You hear me now?
Yes, we do.
I'm sorry. Dale Feek, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network.
Thank you, Mr. Keith. I will also remind the group that we are recording this evening's meeting. And Chair Song, I believe we have introduced everyone who is present on the call at the moment. I will alert you if others join us in progress.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. Okay, next up is review and approval of the summary from February 9th meeting. Those were mailed to all commission members. Any comments, questions, or corrections? Okay, hearing none, we'll consider those approved and move on to our presentations tonight. Tonight we have Kathy Leader, Chief Financial Officer of CWS, to guide us through the budget overview for the fiscal year 2021-2022. And this is informational for the commission.
So as Kathy pulls that up, I'd like to provide a little bit of context as she loads the slideshow up. We have 3 new, thank you very much, budget committee members who we'll have the opportunity to spend the day with on May 6th. Fatima and Matt and Terry. And I think as we thought about that, and we also thought about the new members on CWAC, Diane really wanted to provide kind of a framework for our new CWAC members and for our incoming budget committee members for kind of a framework of what our budget looks like. And then following that, a discussion of our budget is really based around what our strategic plan looks like, the strategic outcome that we have that really guides the actions we have. So tonight, in some ways, is the strategy and then how we implement that strategy through the budget to give you a sense. And for the new budget committee members, this is good. When you get the budget I think you get it on April 22nd. There's also the opportunity to say, oh, I'd like to still learn more, and we can certainly set up those meetings. But with that framework, I'm going to hand it over to our Chief Budget Officer and our Chief Financial Officer, Kathy Leader.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Chair Song. So next slide, please, Stephanie. So today I'm going to be providing an overview of Clean Water Services budget process for the group. As Mark mentioned, this group plays a vital role in deliberation and approval of the district's budget each year, and we felt it was beneficial to provide an overview of the budget process based on development of our current budget for fiscal year 22, just to give you an idea of the process that's coming up in 23. So for the agenda today, we're going to be just doing a budget overview, talking about some of our investment priorities as we develop our budget and where we spend our money in the budget, some of the financial assumptions we make in preparing that budget, the revenues that we anticipate and propose, along with any rate increases that we do and comparisons to historical trends on rate increases. And similarly, the expenditures included in our budget for the investments and our priorities, and then programs and services we're investing in. Next slide, please. District staff start development of the district's budget in the fall of each year. October through January, project managers develop and update the 5-year capital improvement plan, which is the basis for capital investments proposed in the budget. February through March, the departments develop their operating budget requests, including the requests for labor ads. In April, the proposed budget document is prepared, including the budget message and budget committee presentations. In May, the budget committee meeting is held. The purpose of this meeting is for the committee to receive the district's proposed budget and budget message, receive public comment, and finally deliberate and approve a budget for adoption by the board. This year's meeting will be held Friday, May 6th as a virtual meeting once again. And finally, in June, the board will then preside over a public hearing where the public has another opportunity to provide comment. The board's final action will be the adoption of the district's budget at the June board meeting. Next slide, please. The investment and priorities that were the basis for development of the fiscal year 22 budget include workforce and program and services resilience to support succession planning, professional development, program development, and innovation for the district. Also, we included facility maintenance and renewal, recognizing our aging facility and infrastructure needs. And finally, our investment in gray, green, and natural system infrastructure to support growth, system expansion, and increased regulatory requirements. Next slide. This slide provides a great visual of the summary of the district's current year sources and uses of funds. So in the year, we're using 188.9 million in current revenues, of which a majority relates to rate revenues. And these are used to cover 95.9 million in estimated operating costs, including labor and material and services, 93.6 million for capital investments, and another 21.7 million for debt service principal and interest payments. Next slide, please. First, I'm going to talk about the current year revenues. This slide shows budgeted annual revenues by type for fiscal year 21 and 22. So 21 is a comparison for 22. The budget for fiscal year 22 includes annual revenues of 189 million. Service charges make up 84% of the total revenues, and when combined with the second largest revenue source of system development charges, totals 175 million, or 92% of the total budget for revenues. The remaining 14 million, or 8% of current revenues, includes miscellaneous fees, contributions from developers for construction projects, grants, Build America bond subsidies, and interest earnings on cash investments. For fiscal year 22, current revenues increased by about 5.7 million as compared to the prior year. This increase is primarily due to the increase in sanitary sewer and surface water management rates and customer growth. Next slide, please. The annual budget process typically includes adoption of planned rate increases identified as part of the district's financial forecast. The fiscal year 22 regional and local sanitary service rates increased by 4.5%, and the regional and local surface water management fees increased by 5.4%. System development charges increased based on the published Engineering News Record Construction Cost Index as of March of 2021. The sanitary sewer system development charges increased by $285 to $6,085 per equivalent dwelling unit, and the stormwater management system development charges increased by $25 to $585 per equivalent service unit. Next slide. So this is showing the 10-year annual average increase in combined sanitary sewer and stormwater management rates at 3.43%. This trending reflects the district's adopted policy of reasonable rate increases on a regular or annual basis to promote predictability for the customer and revenue stability for the district. The 4.66% increase in the combined sanitary sewer and surface water management rate in fiscal year 22 reflects the impact of deferring rate increases in fiscal year 21 due to the pandemic. Rate growth is vital to the long-term financial health of the district and its ability to invest in infrastructure for growth and resilience and to meet increasingly stringent federal and state water pollution control needs. Next slide, please. The district's average residential customer combined sanitary sewer and stormwater management rate for fiscal year 22 is $57.77 per month. This combined rate is lower than our comparable cities, including Vancouver, Salem, McMinnville, Lake Oswego, Portland, even though the district provides a substantially higher level of wastewater treatment than nearly all local, regional, and national providers of comparable services. Next slide, please. Next, I'm going to talk about the expenditures. This slide shows a comparison of the budget to 21 expenditures versus the 22 proposed at the time, which is now an adopted budget for 22. The fiscal year 22 budget includes an annual expenditure of $211 million. Operating costs include personal services and material and services totaling under 89 million or 43% of the 22 budget. Capital investment costs total 93.6 million or 44% of the budget, and debt principal and interest payments account for 21.7 million or 10% of budgeted expenditures. Other fund outlays of 7 million or 3% of the budget expenditures include utility, bad debt expense, franchise fees paid to cities, and pass-through of right-of-way and local rates to cities with industrial customers within their city limits. Fiscal year 22 expenditures are proposed to or planned to increase by 10 million as compared to the prior year. This increase reflects a $2 million increase in labor costs, a $2 million increase in material and services, and a $6 million increase in capital investments. Next slide. The budget identifies and invests resources for the following programs and services. Business services, which includes administrative programs that support the district operations such as legal, human resources, digital solutions, finance, and procurement. Regulatory affairs, which works directly with the district's industrial customers and ensures the district's compliance with state and federal regulations. Utility operations and services, which is responsible for design, construction, and maintenance of conveyance systems. Water resource recovery and operation services, which is responsible for operation, maintenance, and engineering for the district's water resource recovery facilities and pump stations. Natural systems enhancement and stewardship, which is responsible for development and maintenance of natural systems, promoting regulatory compliance through innovative regional community-driven programs. Enterprise assets and technical systems, which provides asset management, planning, and implementation of asset replacement and renewal projects for the district. And finally, the regional utility services, which is responsible for customer relations, economic development, and community planning, strategic integrated planning and policy development, and utility intergovernmental relations. Next slide. As noted earlier, the budgeted operating costs for fiscal year 22 are just under 89 million, which is a 4.8% increase over the prior year. Labor costs increased by 2.3 million or 4.3%. This is primarily due to the addition of 5 new FTE and conversion of 12 long-term temporary staff to regular full-time. Materials and services increased by 1.7 million or 5.7%. The main driver for this cost increase related to an increase in property and new cyber insurance of 1 million and an increase in software licensing at 365,000. Next slide. To give a perspective of operating program investments by the district, for every $1 spent, the district invests 31 cents to water resource recovery, 15 cents to utility operations and services, 26 cents to business services and support of operations, 8 cents to regulatory affairs, 8 cents to natural systems, 6 cents to regional utilities, and 6 cents to enterprise assets. Next slide. Another significant investment in the budget relates to capital construction and in the investment in gray, green, and natural system infrastructure. The district focuses on investment to meet growth and system expansion needs in response to aging infrastructure and to meet regulatory requirements. I want to give some examples of capital projects the district is currently constructing that meet these priorities. First, investments due to growth of the service in the service area and customer base. First, I want to talk about the Durham Unified Fermentation and Thickening, or UFAT, expansion project, which replaces the existing fermenter system that is operating at capacity in Durham with a total cost of $10 million. We also have the Brookman Trunk project that expands system service to the Brookman, Sherwood West, and New Sherwood High School with a total cost of $10 million. The Rock Creek Primary Clarifier number 4 project, which provides additional primary treatment and increases wet weather flow capacity with a total cost of $16.6 million. The Bendemeer Trunk, which is a joint project with the city of Hillsborough to accommodate industrial growth north of Highway 26 with a total cost of $3.5 million. And finally, construction of the Norwood, Tile Flat, Rosedale, and Quail Valley pump stations over the next few years with that growth. Investments in response to aging infrastructure and asset management include upgrades to the Forest Grove effluent pump station to send water to the western wetland natural treatment systems during the summer months and to the river through the newly constructed outfall pipe during the winter months at a total cost of $9.2 million. Also, the Hillsborough High Head Pump Station project will provide needed upgrades to increase its reliability and ensure permit compliance with a total cost of $5 million. And finally, for that category, the Forest Grove Rehab Phase 3 project at Pacific Avenue and Birch, which will control influent infiltration and offset the need for future capital projects at the Forest Grove Water Resource Recovery Facility with a total cost of $6.7 million. For our investments in response to regulatory requirements, I've included the Rock Creek Recycle Water Improvement to achieve a recycled water system distribution capacity of 7 MGD for the 2023 irrigation season with a total cost of $5 million. And the Fano Wet Weather Pump Station to offset capacity deficiencies and potential for overflow in the Fano Creek Trunk Sewer with a total cost of $16 million. That gives you a flavor of some of the investments in the coming year for gray, green, and natural systems. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available if there are any questions.
So thank you, Kathy. That gives you a quick version of what we'll do over probably 3.5 or 4 hours on the 6th. And that is really looking back at what we did last year, but to kind of give you a sense of where our sources of funds are, where our uses of funds are, and then where the decision points are that the budget committee and the board will be making. So I just wanted to set that framework if people had any questions.
Hi, Kathy, this is Terry.
Hello.
Hi. I was curious, the SDCs look like they dropped by $2.5 million between the two budgets. Is that a trend or temporary?
Yeah, so when we were putting together our 22 budget, we were conservative. We were noticing that activity in 21 had a downturn with the pandemic, and so we did reduce in our estimates our SDC amounts, but we actually are seeing them staying in line with historical trends. So we're above budget in that area this year, which is positive.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And the people costs, sounds like the increase is due to additional staff. Have we seen any increases in needing to increase salaries for retention?
We are looking at in the 23 budget, some of the things we're going to be looking at are class and comp. So an overall evaluation of, wages for our work group that will have an impact on the budget process. Also, we're going to be going into union negotiations, so that obviously has an impact. And yeah, we're looking, recruitment is difficult right now, and we're looking at ways to recruit and maintain and retain good staff. So we are definitely looking at potential increases related to benefit offerings for our candidates.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Stephanie, do we see any other questions?
I do not, Chair Song.
I did put a question in the chat. I'm not sure if you can see it. And I was wondering, I know Clean Water Services has done a lot of planning around climate change for capacity and so forth, but are you thinking about this I'm sure you are, but how are you thinking about this in terms of the longer term? Because I would assume you're going to see a lot of cost acceleration as time goes by with climate change, and then you're going to have some unpleasant surprises. So you won't be able to maybe stay as steady, low rate increases. So I'm curious to what your thinking is on that. Thanks.
So let me start with that. And Kathy, actually, there's two big pieces there that from a resiliency standpoint. One is the seismic planning. So because we do have assets that aren't seismically resistant. So trying to look at how we plan for those when we replace them, how we make them more seismically resistant. And then at the same time, we're trying to look at the climate adaptation side. And you might have seen it a little bit from the East Basin Master Plan. We talked about that. It's the first master plan that I can remember that seismic resiliency and climate adaptation were actually part of the criteria for how we do that. Because, see, you know, some of you may have remembered our former general manager, Bill Gaffey, talked about it's so difficult to drive through the rear view mirror, which is what master planning is. You look at historical trends to plan for the future. And what we're trying to instead do is build the broader capacity size on things. You know, maybe you make the pipe a little bit bigger. The other thing that you're probably most very familiar with is our plant palette for our tree for all program. We have about 54 different plants that we plant. There are some plants that are having to fall out of that inventory because we're reaching the edge of their boundary. And instead, we're trying to look at what are the plants that are thriving in Medford, right? Should we be planting plants like that? Because that's the plants that we're going to need to meet our permit in 2035. So those are some of the places that we're trying to think there. The one other place that we're playing a little bit is on wildfire planning. So we pulled together a group with the Joint Water Commission too to look at how we do wildfire resiliency planning, particularly around drinking water resources. And I mean, a lot of us got a little jumpy after that Hague Lake fire a few years ago, right? It didn't threaten the water source, but goodness gracious, what if it did? So those are the main areas, I think.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, you're welcome.
Mr. Wellner.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys sharing the current budget. I've been kind of poking through it, and I get to some parts of it, like the super small spreadsheets, and I kind of glaze over. But as a new member of the budget committee, what's the expectation for us? What do you want us to bring to that conversation? What will be helpful to staff?
Well, one thing this year in the 23 budget document, we put together what we call an executive summary at the very beginning. So that's a great place to start if you don't have time to go look into the detail. We give a great summary at the very beginning, and you can see some of the key areas initiatives that we have going on and where we're planning to spend money and changes from budget year over budget year. So really focusing in that and bring forward, questions as a citizen member to the group.
It's more of a Q&A, we're not making strategic changes to the budget at that meeting. It's to help us understand it.
And bring questions. If you have questions or concerns related to an area we're proposing in the budget, bring them forward. That's you're the citizen member showing up, and then obviously another big piece is listening to any public comment that's provided.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. One thing that could be helpful as a budget committee member, and I say that you're a budget committee member, and so is our chair is a member of the budget committee too, and she's done this in the past, is if you see questions in advance of that and you want to submit them in writing, preferably not the night before, but let's say, the week before, we'll put together a whole list of these are questions that have been raised and here's how we've answered them, or we're working on them still, and then we can produce that as a document too. We've done that in the past.
Great, thank you.
Chair Song, I do not see any other hands at the moment from membership.
Okay, great, Stephanie. Thanks. We will move on to our next agenda item, which is the Clean Water Services Strategic Planning Overview, presented by Jack Long. And Mark, are you standing in for Diane?
I have great confidence in Jack's ability here. So actually, I think he will cover it tonight.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, Jack. You are on. And this item is also informational.
Thank you, Chair San. Good evening, members of CWAC. And it actually took me a second to find my unmute button as I was sharing screen at the same time. So thank you for your patience. And it's actually very exciting to be chatting with you about the to be chatting with you about the strategic planning effort that Clean Water Services as an organization has gone through. It's actually a tremendous effort, and also it was conducted with the leadership of Diane. It's a little unfortunate that she is not here to actually provide more background and context from her perspective, but I'll try to do my best to channel her messages with your committee. So one of the questions, as a Chief Strategy Officer at Clean Water Services, which is a new role that was established this last year, one of the questions that I get asked the most is, what exactly does the Chief Strategy Officer do? So as actually one of my priority areas, among other things, is actually to help the organization carry forward its strategic planning effort and continue with its strategy development processes. So that's definitely within my span of responsibility areas. And tonight, we're going to go over some background on the Clean Water Services journey on our strategic planning. And then we're going to talk about this document, which was shared with you. It's called our strategic approach at Clean Water Services. And then we'll also talk about the performance excellence program, which goes along with that strategic planning effort. And then also talk about the next steps for, especially where it relates to the CWAC as a committee. To start off with the background, I have to say that in comparison to history and where we are now, Clean Water Services has went through a lot of development in terms of its strategic thinking. Now, since Clean Water Services was formed from the beginning, the organization has been very successful throughout history. So there is no right or wrong answer in terms of strategic planning. It just depends on the environment and the expectations of our customers and our stakeholders. So in comparison, historically, the organization has been very action-oriented. A lot of decisions were made on an as-needed basis. And while the previous leaders has thought about strategy on a regular basis, on an ongoing basis, those are always reflected in the actions and in the regular operations within the district. Now, under Diane's leadership, we actually made some pivot into the strategic planning process, where we are actually continuing on with the action-oriented tradition that the organization has always had, but also on top of that, building a formalized process about strategic planning, about strategic development that will help us document strategic planning, document thought processes, the reasons for decisions, especially those very important investment decisions. And then that will actually be carried on and help the organization to be more resilient and to help the organization to have a better succession planning as we are starting to see turnovers in leadership positions as well. So that is the history and the now. So it's a slight pivot from our historical approach on strategic planning. So you have been shared with a copy of our strategic approach. This has been a tremendous effort that was conducted by the CEO herself, Diane, and working with the strategy team that's within the organization in developing this document. Now, this is not to be confused with the strategic plan. The strategic approach actually is the first part of the strategic plan that serves as a background information, serves as a system and a philosophy that guides the work of the people of Clean Water Services as we contribute with a common purpose toward the 5 strategic outcomes that is laid out in the strategic approach. So there's less action, but more about background, the culture, the philosophy, and the expectations of Clean Water Services. And we will actually build a strategic plan based on the background of the strategic approach. And to implement the strategic approach, sorry, got my tongue twisted. And we actually adopted the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework. And that is illustrated here in this graph right here. And the Baldrige Performance Excellence Framework is actually a widely adopted performance excellence framework by many organizations. It's the most significant place is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. And the organization's mission is to improve competitiveness and performance of U.S. organizations for benefit of all residents. There's actually a lot of public sectors, a lot of private sectors, not-for-profits that participates in this framework and this program. And this program actually has a very wide community base, a very wide participation rate, And then it actually does 4 things based on its program description. It raises awareness about the importance of performance. It also provides organization assessment tools and criteria. So essentially, we're not creating some new wheels. We're borrowing some really good best practices out there to implement, to use as our tools here at Clean Water Services. And then this program also educates about practices of best-in-class organizations. We're actually able to connect with other folks that has been participating in this program, have went through their strategic planning journey, and then learn from the best within the nation. And it also recognizes national role models within the program as well. So as you can see, this chart will jump into that a little more detail, but keep in mind there's a leadership side, which is tied directly to the strategy and the customers. And then there's also this results side, which is a reflection of the organization's strategy planning and execution, which ties directly to the workforce and the operations of the organization. So moving on to the next slide. So what's in the strategic approach? There are actually 5 major parts that we developed in the strategic approach. There's the message from the CEO, which served as a background of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And then also, we are using this document to document who we are as Clean Water Services. And also it lays out our mission, vision, promise, and values, and also tells the story of how we are working together for the river. Last but not least, it identifies 5 key strategic outcomes that will serve as the guiding post for our strategic planning effort for the entire organization. One slide too fast. So first of all, the message from the CEO. This is really where Diane provides her perspective, provides her vision to the entire organization about what this document is about, what is our strategic planning effort, and why we're doing all of this. So she definitely expressed her thought around the one water concept that supports our ecosystem, that supports our economy, that supports our community. And then she also went into the stewardship of the public infrastructure while protecting public health and other watersheds. That is our responsibility. And then the water resource utility of the future. She actually sees Clean Water Services not as just one of many water or wastewater utility within the nation. She sees us as an excellent organization that will actually not only manage through the rearview mirror, like Mark said, but also look into the future and proactively address the future as an organization, which leads to the Tualatin River that is healthier than ever. That's our vision. And then she wraps up by explaining why do we need a strategic plan to continue our high level of services and value to the river and the community. And that is by fostering deep connection between staff and organization strategy, embracing our leadership in the water resource recovery area, staying innovative in managing our water resources, and honoring our community in our daily businesses. So it's really a very, very, very good message from the CEO herself, and it actually communicates to the entire district staff. And then moving on, so talking about who we are, there are pages in the document actually speaks to the working for the river since 1970, goes into the history of the formation of Clean Water Services and why do we exist as an organization. And then also goes into the aspects of our river, our ratepayers, our people, our county, the permit, and then our assets. Those are all very important aspects of the uniqueness of Clean Water Services and provides as a background information for existing employees, new employees, stakeholders that are interested, folks like members of the CWAC, our Board of Commissioners, to really, in a one-page summary, understand who we are as a wastewater utility within our region. And then we go into the mission, vision, promise, and value. This is where we laid out clearly what the mission of the organization is we provide cost-effective services and environmental sensitive management of water resources for the Tualatin River watershed. And then our vision is to enhance the environment and the quality of life in the Tualatin River watershed through visionary and collaborative management of water resources in partnership with others. And we also have a promise for our community. The promise is beautiful clean water for today and tomorrow. It highlights again our aspiration to look into the futures and not only manage today, but manage to the tomorrow for future generations. So those are the areas of the mission, vision, promise, and value that we actually laid out in the organization. And we also have a list of about a dozen values that is listed in the document that guides our decision making, guides our work on a regular basis. So the 5 key strategic outcomes, we call them KSOs, and these are really the core of what we're striving for when it comes to strategic thinking. How does that relate to our day-to-day work? The 5 key strategic outcomes are organizational excellence, integrated water resource management and resilient watershed, research, innovation, and resource and recovery, catalyzing transformational partnership, and contributing to the region's environmental and economic vitality. So we'll go into each one of these a little bit in depth just to kind of provide a little more detail of what each one of this means. Starting with organizational excellence. So CWS is a highly effective and transformative organization that maximizes the capacity, talent, and effectiveness of our employees to provide services and products that deliver on the value of the region we serve. Now, the Clean Water Services has been doing a really good job in this area in the past, but as we all know, our environment changes, our challenges changes from a regulatory perspective, from a climate perspective. So all of those challenges continue to change the game on us. We're excellent in one day does not necessarily mean that we're excellent in another day. So this is really the organization's aspiration to stay excellent throughout our operations and throughout into the future. So the next one is the integrated water resource planning, integrated water resource management, and resilient watershed. So this is really speaks to in partnership with others, CWS creates resilient watershed by optimizing and integrating the management of water resources for the benefit of the public and the environment. What really goes into this particular KSO actually does speaks to Laurie's question about what is the Clean Water Services plan in terms of handling those future challenges. And those challenges meaning it actually includes the climate type of challenges, regulatory type of challenges, and it actually can reflect back into financial challenges that we may face, no matter if we end up with as major projects or like what we're dealing with the economy right now, which is a high inflation rate and a quick escalation of our cost. So how do we actually work with our partners and then coming up with integrated plans that we're being responsible for ratepayer dollars, but also at the same time delivering the best service possible to the ratepayers that rely on our services is actually all involved in the integrated planning perspective. Next, we have research innovation and resource recovery. Now, this is another tradition that Clean Water Services has been doing a really great job in the past, and we really highlighted this to carry that forward and making sure that's part of our core value. And Clean Water Services provides services and products that deliver practical and programmatic water solutions for our region to recover resources and to optimize our operations through innovation that is shared globally. So if you have seen our treatment plant facilities, if you have seen our natural treatment systems, you can actually see that we're not just taking the wastewater, treating them and dumping them somewhere. We're actually recovering a lot of resources through the biosolid program, through the wastewater treatment program. So by the end of the process, actually a lot of the resources are recovered from the wastewater, and we are actually returning clean water back to the river. So that speaks to the organization's history of research and innovation, and we want to continue to do that. That's another post that actually doesn't stay still. It changes all the time, and the technology changes all the time. So we, as an organization, want to stay on top of that. The next one is a catalyzing transformational partnership. As mentioned, that we realize that to handle those future challenges, we're not able to do that all by ourselves as an organization, and we cannot do that in silos. So really having partnerships that's in the region, both by connecting better with the cities, with the county, and also our not-for-profit partners that actually participate quite a bit on our initiatives is going to be a key strategic outcome that Clean Water Services look at. So we go beyond our organizational boundaries to create and sustain strategic partnerships in this region to accomplish more than any one organization can do alone. It really highlights Clean Water Services realization of the importance of teamwork And that's not only within our team, but also goes beyond our organizational boundary. And last but not least, contributing to the region's environmental and economic vitality. That is, Clean Water Services' sound planning, investment, and stewardship in regional assets is essential to Washington County's continued appeal as a place to invest, live, work, and play. So we really keep our employees, our community, the vendor community that's in the area, and our partners that's in the cities, not-for-profits, the county, all in mind about how we will be an active partner working with our partners to really help the region to continue to be sustainable and a place of choice to live. So before I jump into the Performance Excellence program, that actually concludes our strategic approach. I want to pause it over here to see if there's any questions related with our strategic approach. Okay, not hearing any, we'll jump right into the next step. So the Performance Excellence program, as mentioned before, is actually what helps implement the strategic approach and how we are going to realize the 5 strategic outcomes that we have laid out. So the Performance Excellence program is built on that Baldrige Performance Excellence framework, and then we're actually giving it our unique spin and making it Clean Water Services Performance Excellence program. That includes defining the different components. Now, I have illustrated in this graph over here, which is the core of the Baldrige Performance Excellence program. It has the 6 key components, which includes the leadership, the strategy, the customers, workforce, operations, and the results. And encompassing all of that, there's also the organizational profile, which actually speaks to the organization's background and what the environment that we deal with. In addition to that, it also has criteria and tools that will help us build measures and help us analysis and conduct knowledge management. So it's actually a very robust tool that can help us to do that. So defining each one of those components that will be unique to Clean Water Services, like what is our leadership component? What is our strategy? What are our customer bases? What is our workforce? And then how does our operation runs, as well as what kind of result are we seeking? So defining each one of those components are our next steps to complete our strategic planning effort. And in addition to that, we're doing the strategic development, which what we call here in Clean Water Services as our roadmaps. And we're actually developing multiple layers of roadmaps. We'll have the strategic roadmaps that will address each one of those key strategic outcomes. And then that gets breakdown into each department within Clean Water Services. As Cassie has provided, that we have 7 departments within Clean Water Services, and each one of them actually has its own unique responsibilities that contributes to the 5 key strategic outcomes. And then from the department level of the roadmaps, we'll get down to the programmatic level of roadmaps, which further fine-tunes the exact action and the exact plans on an annual basis of what are the initiatives that we do, what are the objectives that we're trying to achieve each year. And that all feeds up to the strategic approach, the 5 key strategic outcomes. And with that whole ecosystem, with the strategic approach, with the components of the performance excellence framework, and well-developed roadmaps throughout the 3 layers that I just explained, that is the whole picture of Clean Water Services strategic plan. And what's left from that is the implementation of our strategies, and then monitoring that on an ongoing basis to ensure that we continue to navigate toward our key strategic outcomes. So what is the next step for the CWAC, and how do we want to engage your committee? Is we want you to really definitely take your time and review our strategic approach and provide us your feedback and questions. As proud as we are about this document, there may be things from the community that we're not thinking about, as you are a representation of the community, and you have the responsibilities of providing us your perspectives. And we really want to get your feedback, really want to hear your questions. And then we can schedule future discussions either with individual members or at the CWAC meetings to just go over those. And also, as we are developing the roadmaps, which are under development right now, we're getting pretty good progress on the departmental roadmaps. And actually, if you're part of the budget committee, you will see some of those departmental roadmaps shared with the budget committee in the next months. as we continue to develop those roadmaps, we like to provide those to the CWAC as well. And we'd like to have your review and provide your feedback and questions to help us to make sure that we're not being tunnel vision with only our own perspective, but we're also hearing perspectives from the community and the group that you represent. So that's the.
Jack, I'm gonna jump in here. That I wanted to say a couple of things. One is this is a vernacular that as the commission members you'll hear more. The last time we met, we talked about reuse, and Jared talked about the water reuse roadmap. Again, that's that vernacular to make sure that the actions we're taking are taking us in the direction we want to go. Jack's got a very good point. We'll give it to the entire commission, but the budget committee members rather, will get probably during the budget committee a packet of roadmaps for each department. And what has been helpful for us, and I'll say this as someone who works in a department, is looking at, defining service levels. What is the service level of different actions that department does? What are the metrics that on a very high level that department is using to deliver on these strategic outcomes? And then ultimately, what are kind of the objectives and initiatives that department is going to do to collectively move us forward? I think that'll be really helpful for as a budget committee member to understand, but also as the commission, so you can kind of see where we are moving on that a little bit. And that will be important for us to make sure that we don't have a blind spot, or they make sense to you as we talk about these things, or to have the question to say, this is a service level on this particular item, why? So we need to be able to tell that story better.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you for that addition, Mark. You're kind of spilling the bean a little bit on the format of our roadmap, but it's good spilling the beans. As Mark mentioned, we do lay out the service levels, what we're dealing with, the metrics and the measures. What are the important things for us to track? And then what are we doing about these measures and metrics? So you'll see a lot more detailed, action-oriented plans in those roadmaps. And then moving on to the next slide, that's the end of my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions or hear any of your feedbacks.
I see Fatima has her hand up.
Yeah. Thanks, Jack, for the presentation. Excellent one. This might sound like a loaded question, but I'm curious, what is the reason behind selecting that framework? And do you see any of the criteria being left out? Something need to be added or removed just to tailor it to the organization? Also, could you speak a little bit more about measuring success? What are the guidelines? What is the scoring system that we use to measure the success of each component of the framework? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Fatima. That is such an excellent question. So the reason for the background for the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program is that one, it's a well-known program that's in the industry that is ready to deploy, that has a very mature ecosystem, and by evaluation of our CEO and our leadership team, that is the program of choice. In addition to that, we actually see a lot of pure utilities as well as pure public sector governments that are participants in the program. So we see that as an ecosystem where we can actually benefit from the network of being a participant in the program and using the same framework. So that is the reason that we selected the Baldrige Performance Excellence Program. But we're not just taking it and implementing it blindly. We are actually taking the framework and then adding components to it to make it unique to clean water services. So from the second part of your question is what is missing? Well, first of all, it's a very mature program. So from an inclusion and completeness perspective, it's actually very well in terms of addressing our organization's performance. There are specific items that may be missing from something that's unique to clean water services. For example, when we look at the customers, really what we translate that to for clean water services is not only the customers, but all of the stakeholders that that we relate to. So we're making those kind of small tweaks just to make it more catered to clean water services and make it more unique to clean water services. And the later part of your question is to ask how do we measure success? Actually, that's the kind of thing that you will see in the roadmap that we're developing. It's there's the second of the three sections within the roadmap are actually our thought process of laying out what are the metrics that we want to measure in terms of measuring success toward our key strategic outcomes. There are actually many of them, which it's a district-wide effort actually trying to develop these measures. And it's been a long time since we asked that question to say, we do our work every day, but why? What's the most important thing that we achieve, and what indicates that we're successful in our work? And that story is different from one department to another, and each department is actually very unique in their own sense. So as we continue to progress through that process, actually we'll be sharing a lot more information about that. But ultimately, it's how do we tie it directly back to the 5 strategic outcomes, and then if we can feel that on an iterative basis, we're getting closer and closer to realizing that vision. And that is at a high level how we're measuring success. But it gets to a lot more detailed levels in the departmental and in the programmatic level. Thank you for your question. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you. All right. Do you see any other questions, Stephanie?
I am checking. I do not see hands raised.
Pass it back to you, Chair-san.
Okay, Stephanie, I believe all our questions have been addressed. We're quite far ahead of schedule, but we will move on to invitation for public comment. There's a 2-minute limit, and Stephanie will call on members of the public who wish to make comments.
Thank you, Chair Song. I'm looking now to see if any of members of the public joining us tonight are interested. I believe Mr. Feek might be putting his hand up. Mr. Feek, were you looking to speak?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me, Steph?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, can you give me 5 seconds? I'm setting my timer. Did I see her? I have 2 minutes. Is that what I heard?
Correct.
Set my timer. I'm Dale Feek, Chair of the Washington County Citizen Action Network. Since I have 2 minutes, I'm going to skip a lot of the stuff I had for any extra stuff I need to get a harder measure. I just want to say I appreciated being able to participate in the Clean Water Service Board of Directors Learning Event from 9 to 2:30 on April the 7th. And I'll forget all the other stuff I'm going to say about that. I want to get to the nuts and bolts of what I really want to say. So I had a chance to talk to Nick Dyke, about commercial residential development that causes the rise of his irrigation river. 1-inch rise, as he said, creates 1 to 2 feet of river rise for him, which created real problems for his pumps. Okay. And he said the primary reason for that is runoff from roofs, concrete, and I say roofs. He said roofs, but I said concrete and asphalt to storm water drains. He said the quick rise is not because the water is coming from Scoggins Dam water. My comment is for the developers, in particular on the committee, Tony Waller and Matt Weller and Tony Weller. Development is important, but it's very important to do it so that it preserves, it doesn't cause quick rise of rivers, especially when he has to redo his pumps or dry them out because the river rise is too high. Genetech has just completed a huge parking lot on the new plant on Brookwood. And in California, they have standards, construction and design standards, so that construction, I have 30 seconds left. Construction then has to put in porous asphalt and concrete, so it doesn't run into, so it doesn't run into the stormwater. So I really would like to have Clean Water Services really take a look at that and and try to make recommendations to the Board of Commissioners to get those kinds of design and construction standards so that people like Dyke doesn't maybe give up and forget his farming because he's considering doing that because it's not profitable. All right, I don't know how much time I had, but my timer went off and I got all fouled up with timing myself. So anyway, thanks for listening to me. Please consider what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Feek.
Thank you. Chair Song, I do not see any other hands raised at the moment.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Dale, for your comments. We'll move on to Mark with any announcements.
Thank you, Chair Song. Just a couple of announcements we mentioned before for those of you that serve on the Budget Committee. Budget Committee, we will be meeting virtually on May 6th, Friday, May 6th. The budget books and documents will be delivered to you on the 22nd, a week from this Friday. Those documents, nice big thick book and some instructions, will be delivered to you on Friday the 22nd. The meeting's on the 6th. We will not be having a CWAC meeting in a commission meeting in May. So our next scheduled meeting is on Wednesday, June 8th. Our interest at that time is to actually come together in real life. What are they? IRL in real life? Yeah, to be instead of this virtual stuff. What we're planning on doing is doing a tour of a building that we've purchased in Forest Grove that will be home to our laboratory eventually. It's a building that used to be owned by TTM and has now been rebranded as something called Ripple for us, which is Research Innovation Partners and Laboratories, where our lab will eventually move. I believe it's scheduled to be completed in 2026. That facility is adjacent to the Fernhill Natural Treatment System. There may be an opportunity to do that as well. Since it is a real meeting in person, we're going to probably start later, go later, because we want to be given people's work schedules. We will have dinner at 5:30 for members of the commission from 5:30 to 6:30. Just come anytime. The meeting will start actually at 6:30 most likely, and we'll provide you more details on that as we get closer to that time. So those are the only announcements that I have. Chair Song.
Great, thank you. Just distracted. My house is getting pelted with ice. But with that, we'll adjourn this evening's meeting. Thanks everyone for your time. Good to see everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.
Nice to see you all.